Hey, I'm Tim. I'm one of the pastors at Aldersgate with Cliff Whitmore, who is our vision leader on the Leadership Council. And we're here to walk you through a little bit more of the process about how we are working through a vision statement for our church and how it's going to affect in real time how we end up doing ministry. Cliff, you want to tell us a little bit about this process that we've been working through starting in about, 2020, January 2020? We really dove in hard um, to let people's voices be heard, had a lot of conversations, had a lot of meetings, took a lot of notes, copious notes, to help us hear from the church um, where it had been, where it felt like it was, in some ways where maybe it was going, and we as a leadership team and as a vision writing team have taken all that information and tried to sort of coalesce it into some sort of picture for the future.
Yeah, so this is a tool called Vision Frame, and it's documented in a book called Church Unique. It's written by Will Mancini, and he was formerly, I guess he had started a church consulting company called Oxano, and so they had worked with a bunch of churches and just trying to help them get clarity about these things. So what we did is we took a lot of the what we were hearing from Matt Jones, what we were hearing from individuals, what we were just rediscovering about ourselves, and started thinking about it in terms of the framework that they had documented in that book. So I can give you some more information about this. This is what they call the vision frame. Mm-hmm. The vision frame, it looks like a picture frame, and you can see the aspects of it are around the outside of the frame, and on the inside is something that's called vision proper. So what we're working towards is understanding what is the framework for who we are, and where are we going is kind of the center part of this, which is called vision proper. So the mission is just, what are we here to do? And so as a congregation of the Methodist Church, it's broadly understood that we're here to make disciples. And so we could very simply say that's about what we're about. We could describe that in other language, but in broad terms, mission is about disciple making. The next thing that they talk about is values. You know, what do we as a church strongly value? What do we hold to be super important to us? Because that influences what we're going to be interested in doing, and influences the kinds of things that we're going to be good at, and the kind of people that we're probably going to attract, because it's probably going to be people that are similar to us. So mission is the what are we doing? Values is the why are we doing it? The question of how are we doing it is strategy. It just talks about what kind of steps are we going to take people through in their journey in helping achieve the mission in light of who they are. And so this is the answer to the how question. Measures says, well, how do we know that we're successful? How do we know that we've arrived there successfully? And so measures in our language have been really describing what it looks like to be a disciple of Christ. What are those characteristics of a disciple that we're actually trying to bring about in people's lives? So what are we doing? Why are we doing it? How are we going to do it? And when do we know that we've been successful?
Great. So that creates for us this kind of it's not perfect and it's not super clean, but it gives us these boundaries, right, to start thinking and dreaming in.
Right. So the next question then is, well, how do we get to vision from that? Mm-hmm. And so all these things tell us about who we are. They don't really tell us about where we're going. And so vision says, well, where are we going? And we've been working on thinking about that in light of the outside frame. In other words, the outside frame informs us about who we are, and and so that helps inform, well, we're to be true to ourselves, to be true to who we are at the DNA level as a church, to be true to that, and to be transparent and honest and vulnerable about that. These things are going to inform where we're actually in honesty going to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things I would like about this process is one thing, it's very driven from the inside. It's not an outside consultant coming in and telling you, here's what you need to do to be a successful church. Instead, it harnesses and identifies what the natural DNA of this congregation is, And that's what really creates that frame. This is naturally who we are and how we process doing what we do. So we're not trying to impose some other will on us and trying to get us to format ourselves to somebody else's ideal, but it creates, this is our authentically who we are. This is our authentic self, and now we're going to create a vision of how we're going to move forward with this picture here, understanding really clearly who we are.
Right. So this just provides a way to think about and organize those questions.
Yeah, I like that. Well, tell us then about the vision proper a little bit, as we kind of think of how this process moves into action, because we spend a lot of time the past year. Really, we've spent so much time in Headspace, in thinking and in analyzing, questioning, pushing, probing, and we've had this beyond the horizon vision that we've arrived at. Tell me about how this works and how we get to things where we actually are actionable steps.
Okay, so the beyond the horizon vision, these are all kind of vision steps, and you could think of this chart as showing something that's happening in the distant future, and then moving down the chart, you're looking at steps that are closer and closer to today. So the beyond the horizon vision says, well, what is it that is our picture of the future? And in our case, we've chosen, kind of 3 years down the road, because we've got a very uncertain future right now with COVID-19. How are we going to look as a church, and how does church even look when we can all start to get back together and that type of thing? So we've established and adopted a statement that's the beyond the horizon vision, and the time frame for that, like I say, is 3 years and more. To get there, we said, well, what are the steps that are going to take to get to this and realize this beyond the horizon vision? So the next step is identifying kind of 4 major critical emphases that we want to be working towards, and the time frame for that background vision is kind of the 3-year time frame. So it's similar to this, but this is kind of 3 years and beyond. This says, what are the 4 kind of critical emphases that we need to adopt and be working towards together in order to hit that? Mid-ground vision just says, okay, if we're going to actually be able have good sign that we're working towards these steps, what's going to happen a year from now for us to know that we're kind of on the right track to meeting these things? And so, once again, we're working from the distant future closer. This says, what are the foreground vision? What are the 4 steps, or the most critical next things that we need to be working on? This is in the literature. These are kind of 90-day goals that we would put forth, and so it's just working from future to near term. And this is a snapshot in time, because what will happen is that these near-term goals hopefully will be worked on and probably modified, and hopefully some of them are achieved. And so we'll have this cycle going on, I think, with Leadership Council of rethinking and refreshing these near-term goals and steps and vision in order to keep working towards what we've established here as our beyond the horizon vision.
All right, so we've got this beyond the horizon vision. All right. So tell us about what we have.
So this is, when we say vision here, this is from the previous chart, the beyond the horizon vision. It's the kind of the 3+ year time frame, and we've talked about it as being something that we do feel like there's some sense of urgency there. And this was developed by a vision writing team. It was a group of people that we got together, and they received input from staff, from non-staff, from other people that were interested in the process, and were just engaged with it and wanted to give us input. So we took that input, the vision writing team took that input, and we brought this to the Leadership Council in January, and the Leadership Council adopted it. And so, just briefly, we can read it here. In the next 3 years, Aldersgate United Methodist will focus on relational paths of discipleship that build and enrich a multi-generational church. So this is a statement that has a lot of packed in meaning. There's a lot of loaded words in this, and And so as we begin to unpack what those words are, we begin to start to get a fuller picture of what this vision actually looks like and how it can actually come to reality and fruition in our church.
So roughly a year's worth of conversations, a little more than that really, distilled into these priorities, these identifiable characteristics, trajectories, however you want to phrase it. So the whole church had input. Everybody had a voice and a place at the table to express some opinions about the past, the present, some dreams about the future. Then the leadership team assessed that we had a critical amount of information, what we needed. Identified some people to be a part of a vision writing team. That vision writing team took all of that information, tried to distill it further, tried to create some categories, tried to create some dreams and desires that were evident in the material and harness the DNA of Aldersgate. And so this is the product, right?
Yeah, this is a product, and of course we're trying to figure out how to fill this out as we move closer in time, which we showed on the previous chart.
Okay, so the next line, Aldersgate United Methodist, fairly self-explanatory. Who we are, founded in the 80s, been around for a while, had a lot of great ministry, had some rough patches, thinking about what's coming over the horizon, but maintaining that core identity of being a church in the United Methodist tradition. Anything else to say about that?
No, but being a part of that denomination does inform kind of our slant. It does affect our picture of how we view ourselves and view future. So
focus.
Yeah, so the whole idea behind vision is that there is going to be kind of a common idea of what our future is going to look like, and then we can start moving towards that. Do you mind if I draw on the next page?
Sure, go for it.
Yeah, so we're talking about focus. We're talking about there's a cloud of things that we can do. There's programs, there's ministries, there's opportunities. Ministries, I'm not spelling them all out. There's opportunities. There's a whole cloud of these things that are available to us. There's distractions. There's all these things.
Yeah.
And
good distractions.
There's good distractions.
Yeah.
There's
those are the worst.
Sometimes there's less good distractions. And so there's a lot of good things that we can choose from as a church to go focus on, spend our time with, that we can hire to, that we can assign staff to, that we can form teams and leadership around, and those kind of things. So there's kind of this infinite cloud of things we could be doing, and the question is, what are we going to do? And so I think that hopefully what vision does is it provides a focus. And so I'm hoping that we can use vision as kind of the filter or the funnel or the focusing tool that we can use to kind of hear and say, what is it that we must do? And this, I'm stealing this from Oksana, but this is an idea of just saying vision is a focusing way to take distraction and all of the infinite varieties of things that we could be doing and saying, what must we do? And this takes into, vision already took into account, well, who are we as a church? Who are we as individuals? What is it that we're passionate about? What is it that our community needs? Those things were all wrapped up in this idea of vision. And so if we can allow that to use, if we can allow ourselves to use that as a focusing mechanism, we should, in hope and reality, be able to decide what is it we must do, and then decide how we're going to spend our time doing that and prioritize this over this, be able to plan for certain things to happen and that type of thing. So we're hoping that vision provides a way to focus from here to there.
Love it. Okay, so we come back to relational paths of discipleship. So next 3 years, Aldersgate United Methodist will focus on relational paths of discipleship. That feels like a loaded statement, which is part of the nuance of having a vision statement is you want to use specific words that are dense in meaning and need to be unpacked. So let's unpack relational paths of discipleship a bit.
Yeah, it is very packed. Just even starting with the first word, relational. there's a lot of meaning there. We don't expect people to become disciples by themselves. We expect disciples to make disciples to cultivate disciples, which means that we're doing this together. We're doing it in community. We're doing it with each other. We're not giving somebody a pamphlet and saying, "Here's your instructions. Go, construct by yourself." So relational is we're doing this together. We're relying on each other. Some people have experienced things that other people haven't, that have been very instrumental in their journey, and so being able to share those with each other, all that's involved in relational and much more. But we consider doing this in community as being the way to do this and go along with each other and journey together. Mm-hmm. Paths is also a great loaded word. When I think of paths, you think of established ways to go. So I've been on hikes in the mountains before, and it's always easier to take the path that's already been established than it is to bushwhack your own path. And so one of the nice things there is that we know that there's ways that people have found that we're becoming a disciple is easier because they're following some things that other people have done in the past that have proven to be useful and beneficial to them. And so somebody has already walked that way before, and if it's a path, it probably means that many people have walked that way before, and it just helps us adopt some things and some practices and those kind of things that have gone before us. So there's lots of meaning in paths, but that's part of it. And we also, when we're talking about paths, we're not talking about this paved road where if you get on this road and you take it, we're gonna guarantee you land at another place. We're thinking more along paths of being steps, where we say this is a step that people that are kind of at your level of experience and maturity and those kind of things that they have found useful in the past. And so we want to identify those steps that are going to be helpful, and the steps kind of when put together form paths.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I like that. I like the relational nature of it, that it can be a mutual discipleship and it can be a mentor up and down sort of relationship. And the idea of paths and walking, kinetic movement, that there is movement. It's not a static process. It's not predictable all the time. There are expectations that we have of that we are progressing, but it doesn't mean that it's completely laid out. So, like that.
And discipleship is a super packed word, right?
It's got a long history.
That one, a long history. There's a lot that we think of. We looked back on the previous charts and talked about the vision frame, and one of the pieces of that frame is what we think about when we think about, well, what does a disciple look like? And so discipleship means that we are cultivating in each other the fact that we're moving towards looking more and acting more like Jesus. And so when we're talking about being a disciple, we're talking about being an active follower and adopter of things that Jesus said and did, and that we're trying to be the hands and feet on earth of what God's trying to do in the world. And we're trying to follow that and do that in such a way that Jesus already modeled for us.
I think that's important to point out, because one of the pushbacks that we did receive on this was, well, where's the name Jesus? Where's God in this? And that was our response was, well, we're talking about discipleship. That's a very specific kind of discipleship. We're talking about church. That's a very specific designation of what we are going to be, of our organization, that implicitly says, no, this is about Jesus. This is about God. This is about becoming holy, following these certain paths and being a part of this kind of church that exhibits the ministry of Jesus. So,
well, and there's characteristics that we desire for people to be able to take on, just because we know that people are going to be thriving and flourishing if they can adopt certain ways of being in the world. And so we just want to encourage that. and help people identify ways that they can become a flourishing individual, a fruitful individual, somebody that's connected with other people and is bearing fruit with them in community is another word we've talked about along the lines of relational.
Yeah.
And so that involves so disciple doesn't necessarily just mean I've become this this monk, although some people that is the path for some. But it doesn't mean necessarily that I've become this disciple of Jesus by myself and now things are good. It also means, we hope that it means that we're connected with God, that we're connected with each other, and that we're actually bearing fruit in relationship to other people. But we also hope that there's individual maturity that happens as well, and that we do become more like little Jesus.
Yeah. Well, the notion of discipleship is multi-layered. Another question that we had was, well, we don't mention Jesus in here. We don't say anything about God's explicitly. And we also don't say anything about Bible study or servant, doing acts of service. And thought, well, yeah, that's part of how we're going to work to unpack what we mean when we say disciple, is you're becoming a disciple. Well, one typical way of explaining it is that it involves your head, your heart, and your hands, right? So there's this three components of who we are, and all of those need to be engaged if you're going to be a fully formed disciple. So those things are in here, and they'll be unpacked as we go through our process, kind of adding some depth and some layers to these definitions. Moving on to the second part. So we can see that there's an intentional flow. We have a timeline. We have an identifying who we are, why we're doing it. Then we have these parts that are going to play into each other. Relational paths of discipleship, right? So yes, it is good enough to pursue Jesus and be a disciple, but we also want that to have an effect on something other than just your relationship with God and just those that you choose to be in relationship. We also want it to be a part of something that is building and enriching a multi-generational church. So let's talk about how this kind of informs this and what we mean by some of these.
Yeah, so one of the things you kind of alluded to is that as we talk about relational and discipleship, and we are talking about this in the context of a church. And so when we say church, we're thinking about community. We're thinking about not lone people operating independently, but we are thinking about it being a community of people going somewhere together. And so that's a brief explanation for church, but the picture that we really want to paint here with multi-generational is that we feel like everybody can participate in this thing we call church, and this journey we call discipleship. We're hoping that we 3 years from now are looking more balanced in terms of how we're represented across various age groups. We know that each age group kind of has their own characteristics, things they're interested in, things they're passionate about, and those types of things. We're hoping that we can together encourage people in different age groups and different walks of life to come together and maybe do some things as a group, as a community, that maybe we wouldn't even be able to do by ourselves. And so we think that there is some value in having multiple generations operating together, serving together, learning together, sharing with each other. And we think that younger generations have something to gain and learn from older generations, and likewise. Mm-hmm. We think there's a lot to be said for sitting down with teenagers today and learning from them and getting their perspective. Mm-hmm. And we think that enriches the older generations if they're able to sit down and share and spend time with those generations. So we feel like we would love to see multiple generations involved in our church and coming together in community.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's an important distinction between, it's not necessarily intergenerational, where we would make sure that every ministry and every committee and every team has multiple generations represented in it. But it is saying that multi-generational means that as a church, without those generations present, without those demographics present, something would be critically missing from how we even process what it means to be in community. Mm-hmm. So I like that. And that building and enriching, building means obviously more, right? That we know as a church we want to be at sort of a critical capacity to be able to do things in our community, and you just need a certain mass of people and a certain mass of resources and time to do great things. And the enriching part is just what we were talking about, that the full experience of having a meal that has multiple parts to it versus just having just your entree or just your appetizer. The enriching part of having a meal is to have that varied experience. And when we have the multi-generations present and they're feeding into each other and they're helping each other think through the challenges of life, think through the challenges of community, that's deeply enriching. So there's a lot more that we can continue to talk about, and there's a lot more that these words can mean. Part of our challenge as a leadership team is using this, like we said, as our funnel and our filter for what ministries we do or don't pursue, what things that we have been doing, that we ask about how they fit into this and where they fit in. Are they relational paths of discipleship? Are they multi-generational in nature? And what things detract that we do and have done, detract from how we pursue this goal and how we get to where we want to go. And I guess that's really the next step, as we already talked about the nature of having our background vision and having our process for moving forward. The movement through these. So we have that background vision, and now we have to really apply that filter, that funnel, for what these things end up being. And that's kind of where we are now, is working through that.
Yeah, we're identifying these major blocks, and what we hope happens, what we plan to happen, is that as we move from distant to near in terms of time, is that we'll get more specific. Instead of having a vision, a picture, we'll say, well, here's some actual tasks and projects and new things that we're going to go try. And so we move from picture to action, and then as hopefully this will become a process that we go through on a regular basis, and we reevaluate. Okay, what's next? How did that go? How did that thing go that we just tried? That ministry, that experiment, and how did that thing go?
Making sure that whatever things fit in here with our vision as we move to the foreground stay within these boundaries of our unique DNA. That we're not trying to change the DNA, we're trying to enhance it and really lean into it. I think about this church, and we tend to be at this church, very foreground oriented, I think, where we want some actionable items, we want some agendas, we want something to tackle. And I think what's such a struggle with this is when you're painting the beyond the horizon picture and you're trying to figure out these background agendas, these big blocks that we're going to fill in, you really sort of want to have this Braveheart moment, and you want to have this big enthusiastic, let's go charge the hill, we're going to do this. But it's a little deeper than that, I think. The process of being intentional about what this picture looks like, and you can do the Braveheart moment down here, right? When you can say, this is our 1 year vision. We are going to tackle this thing, and we're going to put resources and time and people behind it. But when you're up here, you have to be thinking on the bigger scale, and it's not necessarily about charging that hill. It's about figuring out what the whole picture is supposed to look like. And I think that's hard. It's been very hard for me, because I want to move into some action steps. I want to move into things. Tell me what to do. And this is more about, let's figure out how to be before we move into the do.
That was one of the struggles that we had just with the vision statement in general, is that a lot of people that have seen it already and read it, and some of the feedback we got was, well, it doesn't tell us how. And it's really not intended to tell you how, because you have to kind of work through this process to figure out the how. And so it intentionally doesn't include how, but it quickly introduces the question of, well, okay, this sounds like a great direction to move, a great picture that we're trying to envision, but boy, how are we going to get there? And so a lot of people are asking that question. They're eager to get into those steps, and which is exciting for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's very exciting, and that's where you really generate a lot of momentum and a lot of interest and enthusiasm. Engagement is down here. This, that's spent in the background work and the leadership teamwork as it gets as it trickles down and comes closer to the foreground. Really, we start to get our hands dirty and start to figure out how we get motivated, how we align resources, and how we really do take those hills that we determine. So I'm excited about that. Thank you and Johnny for leading the process, leading the leadership team, and really for you digging into the Will Mancini, the God Dreams book, and the Future Church. Future Church, is that the name of the book?
That's the next one.
Yeah. So if you wanna know where we're coming from, how we've arrived at some of these ideas, what the work that Cliff has been doing a lot in the background, and kind of pushing us as a leadership team to begin thinking about these things in new ways, because we're in a new era. We really are. I would encourage you though to go and look back at those resources if you want. We have some copies available at the church if you want to look at the God Dreams book. Anything else?
Good, thank you.
All right. So in the next 3 years, Aldersgate United Methodist will focus on relational paths of discipleship that build and enrich a multi-generational church. I'm excited about what the future holds for us.
Me too.